And if you think the question is asking that, you need to reread it and look at it again. There'll be one or two key phrases in that essay question that will be telling you action points or verbs that will be telling you what to do. So it may be, for example, critically analyse the law on defamation in Ireland. Okay? That's not a general essay on defamation. That's asking you to analyse critically, to criticise, to critique. So, for example, in that type of answer, you would go through current Irish defamation law, obviously, but also you would have reference to maybe other jurisdictions, maybe the Reynolds Qualified Privilege in the United Kingdom, or even most recently, we have the Defamation Bill 2006 and the proposed reforms there. So be very, very conscious of that. Essay questions, you can be lulled into a false sense of security thinking, it's right all you know on. It isn't. So be very, very careful of that. The problem question, on the other hand, may seem at the outset to be more difficult because you're familiarizing yourself with a set of facts that you've never come across before. However, in many ways, the problem question is actually sometimes easier to score higher marks in, because in that situation, the examiner has a certain defined number of points he wants you to discuss. And from those points, he's created or constructed a hypothetical factual situation. So the examiner may have 4 or 5 points he wants you to discuss in that problem question. You hit 3 to 4 of those points. You won't have to hit absolutely every single one. But if you hit 3 to 4 of the main points in that question, you're going to score very, very well in that question. Again, particularly in relation to the problem questions, the write all you know method does not work. Okay? Again, in that situation, you should adopt your well-known ISAC method or ILEC method. That is, I, identify the issues, S, state the law, A, apply the law, and C, conclude. And the key issue, what separates the men from the boys in problem questions, is apply the law. A lot of people can learn off law. They can learn off the principles and the case law on defamation. They see the word defamation in a question and they can just throw down everything they know on defamation. But to separate the men from the boys, and probably in the case of Law Society examinations, to determine those who pass from those who fail, what the examiner will be focusing in on is your ability to apply that law to the question at hand. That leads me on to the related point in relation to answering the paper. Many times, and I think virtually nearly every question that the examiner has asked, what he is looking for is hinted in the question itself. So you obviously have a set of facts, taking a hypothetical fact situation, and then you'll have a line, most usual, a break and a line saying, advise Mary and Paul in relation to, okay? That is the key line in that question. The paragraphs before is background information giving you so that you can look and decide what principles apply there. But to answer that question appropriately and to tailor it to the issues that are being asked, you have to pay particular attention to that last line, okay? Invariably, the problem question will say, advise, okay? Again, a no-brainer, but very, very important. Do exactly that. Advise who? The client. So it might be advise Mary. Well, then that is the focus of your answer. That does not mean that you ignore all the bad things in relation to Mary's claim or in relation to the advice. You know, you don't hoodwink Mary. You tell her the good, the bad, the ugly. You tell her everything, okay? You just give her a balanced advice. The question may further, it might limit itself. So it might say, you know, advise Mary in relation to any action in defamation she may have. Now, no matter what you think when you're reading the problem question, you're being asked to limit your answer to defamation. So you're advising Mary in relation to defamation. Now, sometimes the question will be much wider than that, and it'll say, advise Tom in relation to any potential tort action he may have. Now, it may even say potential tort actions. Now, in that situation, the examiner is giving you a lot of latitude. He's not narrowing it down. He's not saying, I want you to discuss defamation specifically here. He's telling you in that sentence that he wants more. So if you look at the problem question and you think, this is a question on nuisance, and you write your full answer on nuisance and nothing else, okay? If the question had said, advise Tom in relation to any potential tort actions he may have, well, you've identified one tort action there. So you need to ask yourself again, okay, the way that question is phrased, it's asking me to look at potential tort actions. I've identified one. I might go back and reread that question again to see, are there any other possible ones? So there may be trespass to land mixed up in the question, or Rylands and Fletcher, okay? Also, again, you know, be careful of what that sentence asks you. In some years, the examiner has asked, you know, advise Mary in relation to potential claims she may have and what remedies will be available to her. Again, time and time again, students appear to answer that question, advise on the potential tort actions, and forget about the remedies. Okay? The question would specifically ask there, advise Tom, Mary, whoever, in relation to any potential tort actions they may have. So that's the elements of the tort that you have to analyse. Okay? And then and advise them of any remedies they may have. So don't forget to do that. The same will apply to defences. Mary's involved in a car accident. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. Tom was drunk driving the car, crashed, and Mary was badly injured. Advise Mary in relation to any potential claim she may have against Tom and any defences that may be used by Tom. So in that situation, you're advising Mary in relation to the principles of negligence and possibly also pointing out from Tom's point of view that maybe Mary has been contributing negligent in her own injuries by not wearing the seatbelt. So they're little things, but again, in the tense atmosphere of an exam hall, you may tend to forget. Focus on the question, read it a number of times, ask yourself what is being asked. This is particularly true in essay questions. They will never come up write all you know on. They will come up critically analyse, discuss with reference to, or compare and contrast. You know, if that type of question comes up, writing all you know is not answering the question. You compare maybe the Irish law on psychiatric damage with the English law on psychiatric damage. Writing an essay on Irish psychiatric damage is only answering half of that question. It's compare and contrast. So look for those key action verbs that are asking you to do something. And that should narrow down your focus and help you train your mind as to what is being asked. The problem questions, again, the problem questions, easier to score marks on, harder maybe to look at the beginning, but as you read through them, they should become clear. And just one final point before I do an actual overview of the syllabus itself, is in relation to writing and writing styles and timing of your questions. Again, it's advice I'm sure you've received many, many times before, but there's no harm in saying it again. If you have to do 4 questions on the paper, or 5 questions in the case of this particular paper, you do the questions. You do all the questions. Time yourself. Give yourself the appropriate time. Set out a period of time at the start of the exam whereby you say to yourself, okay, if I take 10 minutes to read the whole paper, I've got 25 minutes to do each question, or 22 minutes to do each question. You pick that time, you stick to that time, you move on to the next question. It's a total false economy to write 15, 16 pages on defamation because that's your favourite topic, it came up in the paper, you spend 45 minutes answering the question because you say, well, look, I'm not as strong on nuisance, and nuisance is going to be my last question. So I know what I'll do. I'll spend most of my time on this defamation question, and I'll blow them away with my brilliance in answering the paper. Well, if you're spending 45 minutes to 50 minutes answering a question where you should be spending 20 to 25 to 30 minutes, you're doing something wrong. Okay? It's almost like a graph. An examiner, when he's correcting a paper, and this has been my experience, that when you're correcting a paper, a student tends to put down the most relevant information first. So the first 2 or 3 pages of a student's answer tends to be the best in terms of gaining marks. As that paper, that answer drifts on, so in other words, you should be gearing towards answering that question in that 20, 30-minute time frame. Once you go over that time frame, well then what you're putting down cannot be directly relevant because the question is specifically designed to be answered within that 30-minute time frame. So if you're gone into 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, etc., your marks towards time ratio is just diminishing rapidly. It's a false economy. You're better off moving on to the next question the minute your 30 minutes are up, even if, in the worst case scenario, you have to put down a bullet point answer. You will get more marks for relevant bullet points on a new question than you will do spending 30, 40 minutes on the second last question. And one final thing as well, I think it's a good idea also, and this is just practical advice, to try and maybe distinguish your case law that you're using in your answer, in the body of your answer. It's an aesthetic thing, but I think by maybe using a red marker or a different coloured pen for your case names, it sends a signal out to an examiner. After all, he'll be correcting hundreds of these papers, or she'll be correcting hundreds of these papers. And so you want to be able to distinguish yourself and make it easier for the examiner to give you the benefit of the doubt. There is nothing worse, and again I speak from personal experience as an examiner, opening a page, maybe it's the 95th script you corrected, and you open the page and you've got nothing but a scrawl all over it. And there isn't a paragraph in sight, there isn't any highlighted cases in sight. That is the most difficult thing in the world to read. So it is worth your while. Now you shouldn't be going at a snail's pace writing as well. You need to obviously strike appropriate balance. But it's good to have legible writing and highlight the cases and maybe the statutory provisions. Because an examiner can open up the page, maybe scan the answer first before reading it and sees, Question on the duty of care. There's Dunning versus Stevenson. There's Annes versus Merton London Borough Council. There's Capero Industries. There's Glencar. And says straight away, oh, this person's passing this question by mere fact of looking at the spread of case law they have. They'll then read through it then and see the detail and see exactly what marks you get. But if you make the examiner's life easier, if there are any marks, discretionary marks going, they will fall in your favour. That's why, again, a structure of an answer is important. A beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay? Paragraphs, vitally important.